Hello everyone! Welcome to our August virtual mini art session. Here is the painting we'll work on this month. This one, I've got to say, was one of my favorites to work on. It was so much fun. It's so summery. It's so bright and happy. And it's the perfect little item to put on your desk or somewhere where you'll see it often, like a bookshelf. Something like that to remind you of summer all year long. So join me today to learn how to paint this one here. If any questions come up throughout your painting, please post your question right below the video or send me an email and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Have fun, everyone. All right, so let's get started. First, we're going to go through our supplies that we'll need to make this fun little painting. You have got your canvas here. You have also got some paper towels, and you've got some water to rinse your brushes. I chose these 3 brushes. Feel free to use the brushes that are most comfortable for you. So I've got my nice wide flat brush here with the rounded head. This one is that smaller brush, same style, just a little bit smaller. And I've got a small detail brush. I have also got a pencil and a ruler. We're going to just do a little bit of sketching before we kind of dive in with all the paints. I chose many colors for this painting today. So you don't need to get every single color. You can certainly use what you have at home. You can also mix up some of these colors. For example, I've got quite a variety of blues and greens, but you can absolutely make some of these just by adding a little bit of white, adding a drop of a green to a blue, some different things like that. So I'll just go through everything that I used. As you will notice, you're not going to need a ton of some of these colors. For example, these little flowers here. It's a really tiny amount of paint. So what I'm going to recommend is when you're using a very small amount of paint, actually let's get one where you will. So for example, when you use some fuchsia, I would say rather than put it on my plate the way I did, this way I can just show it to you, but what I'd recommend is when it's time to use it, just leave it in the bottle and use what's in the cap. That way you don't waste even one drop of paint. All right, so I'll just run through these colors real quick. We've got white. I have plenty of white on my plate. I have got, let's see, cobalt hue. That's this one here. I've got cloudless, Laguna. We've got Christmas green, parakeet, Kelly green, sunny day, tropic orange, real red, light lilac, fuchsia, peachy pink, blue bonnet, cool blue, English navy. We've got classic caramel, warm buff, chocolate bar, and of course a little bit of glossy black. All right, set these here. All right, so let's jump in. First, we're going to draw our horizon line. So I did it just about halfway down, maybe a little bit less than half. So you can sort of judge where you'd like that to go. All right, gonna do something similar. Right. Just a light line right across. I think I did that about halfway, so half and half. Next, I'm just going to draw in where I would like my lighthouse to go. So I'm going to go over on a little bit over to the right, so just east of the center, and I'm going to pick my point here. So I'm going to go about halfway, maybe a little less. All right, so I'm gonna note right about there is where I'd like the lighthouse to, the bottom of it to go. Oh, let's see. What I'm also going to do is note where I'd like this top point to be. It's gonna go about an inch, maybe a generous inch from the top. Just gonna make a little point. So what I'm going to do is going to make, and I'm going just a little bit lower than this point because we have this formation up top, but you want to get near it from the top point down to the bottom, and you want to try to get the same angle. So it's not super duper slanted, but it's not perfectly upright either. So I've got it, it's very subtle. It's getting narrower as I go towards the top. Now, I am just going to just sort of eyeball where I want this piece that juts out to go. There we go. Now we can fine tune this, of course. There we go. Okay, so we've got our basic lighthouse there. Now, right at the bottom, because we've got a little bit of detail here, just to remind myself, I'm just going to extend this just a smidge. Gonna add a few little stripes. There we go. Alrighty. Okay, next piece, gonna get this shoreline in here. So we've got a little bit of sand jutting out a little bit past the lighthouse. Carry it over, and you're thinking like cove, so you don't want, you want it to be rounded. There we are. While I'm up here, just going to draw about where I want my sand to go. So I've separated my sandy area, and then back here we'll do a little bit of greenery. But it does end right about here. We've got another sandy area right here. Just gonna, there we go. As you can see, I'm just drawing some curved lines here. Just, we're still thinking cove area. This is kind of in a little cove, not out in the open ocean. Okay. From this point, so you'll see here, this is, you can see this part is raised above that, so I'm going to carry this line right across. That's approximately, so this is where I want my sand to come to an end. Right here. And then this area is going to be grassy. We've got a few variations in color in the grass, but I'm going to wait to do that with the paint. So I'm going to leave it just as it is. And you'll also notice a lot of the variation in the color in the water is also with the paint. Oh, but let's finish getting our sandy area. So we've got this area kind of scooped out, and it's a little abstract. This isn't perfectly realistic, and of course we've got the abstract details. So the perspective, you're sort of seeing this from a slightly different perspective than some in the background. So there we go. I am going to leave it at that. Happy with my sketch. Make sure you like the looks of your sketch. Make sure you understand what your lines are for. You don't want to get tangled up in your painting. As I'm reviewing mine, I'm remembering I have a little path here. So I'm actually going to note that this kind of looks like a little path down to the shore. So I'm just going to add one extra line to define that so I don't forget once I get going. Okay. All right, let's start with the sky. So we'll get some of our blue in there. You're going to take your larger brush, and I'm just going to scooch this out of the way. Feel free to have your reference photo with you. That way you can keep taking a look. So I've got my larger brush. For the sky and the water, we're going to use many of these blues. I am going to use this blue here, my blue bonnet. So I've got blue bonnet, some white, and some cloudless. Those are the colors I'm going to focus on most. Of course, I'll add a little bit of this in here too, but I'm focusing on some of these lighter blues for the sky. When we scooch down to the water, that's where I'm gonna dip into my darker blues. Okay. I've also got a bit of a rounded kind of a shape in the sky. All right. I'm gonna mix a little bit. Since we know the sky isn't usually exactly all one color, and I'm just gonna get this line here going. Feel free to overlap a little bit into your lighthouse. Just make sure you can still see what you're supposed to be doing. Okay, get it on the other side. There we go. Okay, I'm gonna start rounding this up a little bit. This part, try not to overthink it. So I'm using sweeping strokes as much as I can, just kind of dipping into my colors, just putting colors in there where it feels right, overlapping a little bit. Just getting it covered at this point. So as you can see, some areas I've blended a little more than others. So I focused on those three blues, those light blues. Now you're going to want to go right through the lighthouse up here because that is sky behind it. There we are. Okay, so take a look at that from a couple different angles. Make sure you like what you see. Not supposed to look perfect yet. There. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. I'm gonna leave this just like that for now, and I'm gonna put my first coat on my ocean next. I'm gonna give that brush a rinse. And I'm going to switch over. I'm going to use my other flat brush. And I'm going to focus in more on this blue here, cobalt hue. Going to use a little more cool blue. Add a little bit of my English navy in there. First thing I'm going to do is just run it straight across, right against that horizon. And I'm doing something similar with my colors. Just kind of dipping into this and that. And you can refine this line. And what's kind of nice is you want to see some of these strokes in there. So this is nice and even. But what I'd like to do is give it more motion. So literally, I am just doing like a little bit of an up and down motion. And you might want to turn your brush, use the side for what's in the back, and use the wider part for some of the front. I'm going to go ahead and dip a little bit into my Laguna. So that's this color here. Just a little. You don't need too much. And we'll add a little bit more after. A little bit of cool blue. This works well if you hold your brush kind of loose in your hands. You don't want to have a really tight grip. There we go. I'm going to take a little bloop on it here. There. So you can sort of see the colors kind of give you an idea of the depth of the water. So we've got dark back here, and I've got some lighter colors up here. And we'll add to that a little bit as well as we go. Now I'm just going to take some of this little leftover sky colors with some white and the ocean on this side of things. Just gonna get some of that in there. Oh, you can see it blends really nice. Now, if you like the color, like I do, that you have on your brush, add a couple of crashing waves in there. Just super duper light. And if you don't like it, your paint's still wet, just kind of smush it around, mix it in a little bit. There. All right. All right, so we are off to a very good start, and look at that, most of our canvas is painted already. All right, so give that brush a rinse. Now we're gonna jump back to the sky, because it looks like our sky is pretty much dry. So make sure you dry your brush between rinses. Now we're gonna add a little bit more of our detail. So as you can see here, we've kind of laid the background, and here we've got thicker sweeping strokes. So what we're going to do next is we're going to do our thicker sweeping strokes, and then later on our last step is to do more of these dabs. So that's not the one we're doing yet. First, just a few of these sweeps. And you can use either brush, either one that you think you'd like. I think I'm actually going to go ahead and try my larger brush. You can see kind of what feels good to you. I'm going to start with one of the colors I didn't utilize too much in here. I'm going to go with a little bit of cool blue. And it is supposed to be abstract, so don't worry. There we go. And you can see I'm covering some edges of my lighthouse, but as long as you can see it still. All right, so I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna go ahead and take, I'm feeling a little bit of cloudless. I didn't even rinse my brush. Just gonna take just a smidge. There we go. Gonna take a tiny bit of blue on it, just little bit. There we are. I'm going to leave it at that. Actually, I'm not going to leave it at that. Just sweep a few more sweeps across just to blend a little bit more. All right, so that looks good. My ocean is still a bit wet, so I'm not going to jump into that quite yet. We're going to go over here, get a little bit of our landscape in there. All right, so give that brush a rinse, and we're going to dry that off. Okay, so let's get our sand on here next, because some of our grass is going to overlap onto the sand. I used some Warm Buff for this portion. Back here, I used the Classic Caramel, so it's a little darker in the back. Here is my Classic Caramel, and I'm just using the side of this brush here, so that's the smaller of the two brushes, but the flat one. You can see some of that comes over here. Feel free to switch to a smaller brush too if this one isn't working for you. And I am sweeping horizontally, because that's sort of the direction after the water washes over. It kind of gives it that motion. So that's what I'm trying to maintain. There we go. And just go right up to the water line. Okay. If you want, take a little bit of Warm Buff. Add just a little if you want to give it just a little bit of variation. There, so I just put just a little bit just to mix it up. Okay, for this part, we're going to use Warm Buff. Just going to wipe a little excess off of my brush. And again, just up to the water line. Doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to polish things up more. Okay, and this one, you can do larger strokes because this one's more on the forefront of the painting. So you've got kind of this pretty wavy kind of motion happening here. There we go. And again, if you want to tie these two together, you can take a little bit of your caramel color. Just add a little bit. Just putting a touch right around the edge here. Couple little dabs. Okay. Alrighty. Let's get our grass in there. We are really cruising. All right, I'm gonna switch over, use my littlest brush here. And similar to what we've been doing here when we're trying to make the background recede, we're using darker colors. When we want to pull it forward, we're using lighter. So we're going to start with some darker green back here and some darker browns. As we move forward, we move from darker green and brown into more of a lighter green and some yellowish green, and then we'll put our flowers in last. Okay, so let's grab a little bit of Christmas green. And I'm going above the horizon a little bit. And again, because it's further away, you don't need to add too much variation in your color. You certainly can if you want, but I'm just gonna stick with this. And I'm just kind of dabbing. Alrighty, there we go. While I've got this color on my brush, I'm just gonna add a few little highlights. I've got my little path here. I'm gonna put a little bit of this. As you can see, I'm just kind of using sort of the side of this brush, and there really isn't a ton of rhyme or reason to adding my color here. I am trying to give it sort of this slope to it, but other than that, I'm going to do a mix of some different greens. So just sort of see where feels like you'd like to put a little bit of this. And we've got a couple more greens to add too, so don't feel like you have to fill in a ton of space. Okay, there we are. All right, I'm gonna scooch into my Kelly green, so that's sort of that medium green. You can see that one's a little bit lighter. And I'm gonna do sort of something similar. Just filling in some of this white. And I'm focusing some of this medium more so in the middle area, and that way I can leave a little bit more room for some of the lighter right in there. Okay, so I've got my path sort of defined. Let's get a little bit of this on here. I'm hoping this is nice and relaxing for you. I feel like this project was relaxing for me. Okay, there we go. So we've just got some different tones happening in there. There we are. Let's jump into a little bit of this parakeet. Put a bit over here. And I'm not really giving this much texture yet. This first step is to sort of just lay a color down. Once you have a base, then we can add our texture, but don't worry about doing that yet. I'm gonna mix a little bit of my medium green with my light? There we go. Okay. So now that I've got my color on there and I need to spread this, I'm thinking grass. So you're going to make short motions upward. And you can go over the sand a little bit. So you're just kind of flicking it upward a little bit. And you don't need to do that on every single spot. But you can jump around. Like, for example, I've got this nice light color on my brush. So I'm going where there's a little bit dark and a little bit of contrast. There we go. Okay. Now I'm going to grab a little bit of my dark again. This part, you just sort of, when you're looking at it and you see a place that looks like it's flat, like a flat green, that's when you should take a different green and go right over it. So it felt sort of swampy right in there, so I took some Christmas green and just added a little something to it. Now I'm gonna let that dry. Now right here, now that I've got a little green on here, grab a little bit of that that chocolate bar color. So that's sort of that reddish brown. Just scoop a little bit of that and mix a little bit of your green. I just grabbed some medium green. You really can grab whichever one you want. Alright, so it's not the most attractive color, but it's definitely earthy. So I'm going to go ahead and just sort of fill this in. So since it's a path, it's not going to be perfect. There's probably, and especially near the beach, probably not completely packed. So I'm doing a little bit of dabbing in there. Alright, so we've got that. Well, you have this nice earthy tone on your brush. If you see any areas where you want to just add something, add just a little tiny bit of variation. Alright, okay, let's rinse that off. Let's give our green a chance to dry. Let's jump back into our ocean over here. Now we're going to do something similar to what we did in the sky. We've kind of laid our base here. Now we're going to take all of these pretty blues and greens, same brush with this nice skinny one, and you're just going to add just a little more color. And it is the ocean. So you're just making some waves. I like to start over here. Just let your brush run out as you get over there. You don't need to rinse. You don't always need to start totally at the back. But just add some variation. And give it some movement. And you can do as much as you'd like. Now, as you move towards the shore over here, you're going to want to grab a few of the lighter colors because that water is going to be shallow. You can certainly add some darker blues in there. Can also grab a little more white. Just want to crisp up some of these breaking waves. There we go. And I want to crisp it up a little bit over here too. I'm gonna stop here, but feel free to keep adding if you want to. Okay, let's add a little bit of that chocolate color. So that's this sort of, it looks a little reddish brown. Now you're just gonna put a little bit right along the edge here, right where that greenery meets the beach. Also gonna add a little bit beside this path. Added just a teeny tiny bit right about there. But as you can see, you really don't need much. It's just a very, very tiny detail. All right, let's paint this lighthouse in. I am going to start with some black, thin brush. Gonna start up here at the top. And this part you want to just focus on because if your lines aren't really too straight on this, it can come out a little funny. So just take your time. Really feel like the trick is just don't overthink it, just do it. And there is somebody in that lighthouse, looks like. So I'm just gonna do that, just to add a little person. You want to make sure too that your black isn't too tacky. That can make it hard. Can make it just a little clumpy. And you want it nice and thin for this part. And if you want, I mean, you can do whatever design you want for this lighthouse. I'm just gonna stick with sort of that stripe. And you can of course do it in another color if you feel like you want to break up the blue a little bit more. If you want to add something a little contrasting. And what I'm going to recommend, which I often do recommend, is to turn this and look at it from different angles. So I'm going to paint it in this direction first, and then I'm going to flip it like upside down and take a look. And that usually helps to make sure your lines look as good as they can, because we also do want that handmade look, but we don't want it too bananas. Right, so I'm going to skip a portion. Definitely an option would be to just paint it a solid color. You could paint it like a red. I feel like that would look really good. Or you could just do a white. All right. Okay. So as you can see, we've got that on there. Needs a little bit of refining. Let's see what we've got. Okay. Okay, here we go. Okay, all right. So what I'll do, once this dries a little bit, I'm gonna add some white in there. I'm gonna add a little bit of red down here. So, whew, I didn't breathe for that. So give that brush a rinse. And actually you could put your red right in now. Same brush, grab a little bit of that red. And this red really would look good in this as well, if you decided you wanted to do that. So, I'm just making streaks. There we are. And then, once I'm ready, I'll add that white. But because I don't want the white to blend too much, I'm definitely gonna wait. Okay, there we go. While we're waiting for our lighthouse to completely dry, now we get to add some of these neat dots. Some of this. So we're going to start from the sky. We'll do the water. We'll do the grass and the sand. So I'm going to take this brush here, so the smaller of the two flat brushes. Make sure that's nice and dry. I'm going to start with a little bit of white. This part feels a little scary to then have your painting and put some blobs on it, but just keep this in mind. Once you balance it out and it ends up looking really cool. So, okay, I'm gonna put a little white here. Just a nice even stroke. There we go. And just let the paint run out. Grab a little more. Put one of those over here. And you can just put them wherever you want. Just using the end of the brush, it's the shape that it has on it. Just add a couple little blobs, and I'm gonna make them a little smaller as I go. There we go. All right, and if you want, you can go back, fill those in a little bit. But I'm gonna leave that like that. I am next going to take, let's see. So you can use any of your favorites. I'm just thinking which one I'd like to try. I think I'm going to go ahead and use my Cloudless. All right, so that's sort of this one here, a very sky kind of a color. Right on this blue streak, I'm going to do some of these little dabs. think I'll do some over here. So do what feels right to you. There we go. I feel like this just really adds a cool kind of an element. I want to add a little bit of yellow, give that a nice pop. So I rinsed off my brush. Grab a little yellow. And right about here, just gonna add a stroke there, a stroke there, maybe a little extra. There we go. Let's see, right on top of this white, I think. So I'm doing this one a smidge differently than I did the other one, but this time I have some different ideas that I want to try. Put a little bit here. There we go. So we've got some palpable sunlight in this one. All right, so I think I'm gonna leave the sky. I like what I've got there. While I have this brush, I'm just going to do a couple more details that I do with this brush. So I liked to add some of these steps to the sand. So I'm going to grab a little peachy pink, same brush. And right along the edge, I'm just going to make some dashes. There we go. Just gonna add just a tiny little highlight while I have this on my brush right up there, just to sort of join the two sides of the sand together. Okay. Oh, actually, I just saw one more spot. This path. Gonna add some extra green onto that. I'm gonna use my Christmas green. It's gonna be my dark green. All right, I'm going to retire this brush. And I'm going to go for my little detail brush. Grabbing some white. And I am making small little tick marks on a couple of areas in the ocean. This is to kind of an abstract way of drawing some of the breakers. There. All right. And at this point too, feel free to add any more white that you want into that water. Okay, let's get a few flowers going. I've got a little bit of lilac. You can just choose where you want these, and just same thing, just little dashes. And I like to make mine sort of look like they are on a little bit of a hill. Going to use a little fuchsia. Same thing. There we go. And a little bit of tropic orange. So as you can see, you need such a tiny amount of paint for this part. It's so worth it to just take it from the cap. Okay. I feel like because I've got some nice yellow up in the sky, I'm gonna take a little yellow. I'm gonna add some flowers right here. There we go. just to add a little something. All right, we are just about done. Just make sure that you're dry in your lighthouse. And then you're just gonna fill it right in. I would use your littlest brush. And you can always go right around the perimeter with like a Sharpie. That seems to work well once it's dry, just to refine it further. All right. Feel free to add any little details that you want. Just adding a couple highlights. There we are. Okay. And that is our project for August. I hope you enjoyed yourselves. As I mentioned, this was one of my favorite ones. I hope this is one of your favorite ones too. So keep your eyes peeled for some of the virtual art videos that I'll be posting as fall gets closer. All right, thank you so much, and please feel free to post any questions below the video. Thank you.